All right, diving right in. It's February 3rd, 2025. You know what that means for our dedicated UPSC folks out there. Another deep dive. Today's a bit of a mixed bag. Got to stay on top of it all.
Absolutely. Keeps things interesting, right?
Yeah.
From budget announcements to global health, even an iceberg making headlines, lot to cover.
Definitely. Speaking of the budget, this national manufacturing mission the finance minister announced, that's got to be on everyone's radar, right?
Yeah, big focus on boosting domestic manufacturing, no surprise there. But what caught my eye were those 5 specific areas they highlighted.
5 areas, right. So it's more than just make more stuff. There's a strategy here. Ease of doing business, future-ready workforce, vibrant MSME sector, technology and quality. A lot packed in there.
Exactly. It's a broader vision. Signals a real shift, I think, towards a more holistic approach. Not just short-term gains, but thinking long-term about how Indian manufacturing fits into the global picture.
Makes sense. But how do these translate into, actual change on the ground? What's the takeaway for
Yeah.
someone prepping for the civil services, trying to connect the dots?
Well, take that ease of doing business's point. We might see some serious policy reforms coming, streamlining regulations, making it less of a headache for businesses to get started and operate. Future-ready workforce, that's got to be about skilling, reskilling, focusing on areas like automation, digital tech, all that.
Right, so anticipating those changes in the workforce, what policies, programs are needed to support that transition?
Exactly. And the credit guarantee boost for MSMEs, that's huge. 10 crore rupees, that's a statement. They're serious about empowering those smaller businesses to innovate and grow.
Because they're the backbone in a lot of ways, right?
Uh-huh.
Job creation, economic dynamism, all that flows from a strong MSME sector.
You got it. And tying it back to UPSC prep, think about the continuity here. This mission, it builds on things like Make in India, shows that commitment to domestic production, self-reliance. That's been a consistent theme.
So those connections between policies, how they build on each other over time, that's got to be key for understanding the economy-related questions in the exam. Not just the what, but the why.
Absolutely. Now, from factories to classrooms, got to talk about that Bharatiya Bhasha Pustak Scheme. Digital books in Indian languages. Big implications for education, don't you think?
This one really caught my eye too. Providing access in so many languages, that's a game changer for inclusivity in education.
Imagine, that student who might be brilliant but struggles because the textbooks aren't in their strongest language. This levels the playing field.
Huge step towards acknowledging India's linguistic diversity.
Hmm.
Education needs to reflect that not everyone's going to thrive learning in just English or Hindi.
Right. And it's not out of the blue. Builds on things like that Asmita project, remember? Thousands of books translated, that collaboration between UGC, Bharatiya Bhasha Samiti. There's momentum here.
So as someone prepping for UPSC, got to see the big picture. Specifics of the scheme, yes, but also what does it mean for educational equity? How does it impact regional languages, development of those literary traditions?
Exactly. Connecting those dots, that's what it's all about. Okay. From textbooks to, shall we say, more high-tech territory, DRDO and composite materials, they're making some waves.
I'll be honest, composite materials always sounded a bit, I don't know, like something out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah,
But they're everywhere, right? Aircraft, even sporting goods.
they are. And the science isn't as complicated as it might seem. It's combining different materials, getting the best of both worlds, so to speak. Each material brings its own strengths.
Okay, so not creating something totally new, but combining the familiar in a smart way. I can get behind that.
Yeah.
So like fiberglass, right? That's glass fibers with that polymer resin. You get something super strong, but also light, which is why it's in everything from boats to car parts.
Exactly. And carbon fiber, that's the star these days. Aerospace industry loves it. Lightweight, but incredibly stiff and strong. Perfect where performance is key.
And what DRDO is working on now, that's a special type, right? Radiation absorbent material, RAM. That's got to be for stealth tech like that AMCA aircraft they're developing. Reading about that recently.
You're right on the money. It absorbs those radar signals, makes it harder to detect. So you see, it's not just about everyday stuff. Composite materials are at the cutting edge. Defense, aerospace, even renewable energy.
So for the UPSC folks, it's about that two-pronged approach. Understanding the science, yes, but also those wide-ranging applications, the impact they have.
Absolutely. Why behind the what? All right, on a more positive note, some good news for the environment. India just added 4 new wetlands to the Ramsar Convention list.
That's fantastic. We keep talking about wetland conservation, so it's good to see action. What makes these new sites stand out? Anything a UPSC aspirant should be paying close attention to?
Well, gotta understand the Ramsar Convention itself, right? International treaty all about protecting and managing wetlands, recognizes how vital they are for biodiversity, water, even fighting climate change.
So it's not just a title, it comes with responsibility.
Yeah.
These sites become part of a global effort.
Exactly. These new additions, Sakarakotai and the Thurthangal, both bird sanctuaries in Tamil Nadu, then Udwa Lake in Jharkhand and Kittiopalri Lake in Sikkim, each one's unique, ecologically, and in terms of the biodiversity they support.
Wait, Udawa Lake? That's Sharkhand's first Ramsar site. That's pretty significant, isn't it?
It is. Shows how Ramsar encourages regional participation. Those wetlands are valuable no matter where they are.
So for someone prepping for UPSC, it's not just memorizing names on a list. It's about the why of Ramsar, the ecological role of wetlands, how that connects to sustainable development. It's all linked.
Exactly. Seeing those connections, that's key. Okay, back to the financial side of things. This statement about NaBFID caught my attention.
Gotta admit, NaBFID is still a bit of a mystery to me. Haven't really encountered it much in my prep so far.
It's fairly new, established just back in 2021, stands for National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, fills a crucial gap in the Indian financial system, you see.
A gap, meaning?
Long-term financing for infrastructure projects. Traditional banks, they're often hesitant to lend for those kinds of projects. They take a long time to see returns. NaBFID, it's a specialized institution, a DFI, designed to address that very need.
Okay, like a bank, but with a very specific mission, laser-focused on infrastructure. This could be a game changer for India's ambitions there.
Absolutely. And one of the things the finance minister highlighted, NaBFID setting up that partial credit enhancement facility of infrastructure bonds. Now that's interesting.
All right, now you're talking finance jargon. Got to break that down for us non-financial wizards.
Think of it this way. You want to invest in infrastructure, but those projects, they can be risky, right? NaBFID steps in and essentially partially guarantees those bonds, makes them more secure.
So it reduces the risk for investors, encourages more investment in infrastructure projects, which is what we need, right, to drive growth, improve quality of life, all that.
It's all connected, exactly. And for those prepping for UPSC, understanding these institutions like NaBFID, their impact on infrastructure financing, that's got to be on your radar.
It's about seeing how financial tools and policies, how they shape those development outcomes. All right, how about we leave the world of finance for a bit and talk about something, well, more spatial. This National Geospatial Mission they announced. What's the buzz about all this geospatial data? What's the potential there?
It's about creating a digital map of India, but not just your basic roads and rivers. Think layers of information, land ownership, resources, infrastructure, everything.
Like taking Google Maps and turning it up to 11, right?
Yeah.
A comprehensive digital model of the entire country.
Exactly. And the aim is to use that data for everything. Planning, development, even responding to disasters.
I could see how that would be useful for land management, right? So many disputes, unclear boundaries, all that could be minimized if we had accurate geospatial data.
Absolutely. Brings clarity and accountability. And it goes beyond that, urban planning, for example. Using this data to design cities that are more efficient, sustainable, resilient.
Or disaster management, real-time data during an earthquake, a flood. That could be invaluable. Seems like there are endless possibilities.
And a key point, it's building on the PM Gati Shakti framework. Remember, that's all about integrated infrastructure development. So bringing geospatial data into that, it's about making those projects even more efficient, coordinated.
So it's all connected again, right?
Yeah.
Using data strategically to create a more holistic approach to development, that's got to be a key theme for UPSC aspirants.
Absolutely. Data, technology, policy, understanding how they all work together to tackle these complex challenges, that's crucial.
Okay, let's uncover a hidden treasure for a bit. This inland mangrove in Guneri village, Kutch, just declared Gujarat's first biodiversity heritage site. Now, mangroves, inland, that's something new.
It is pretty unique. This one's located about 45 kilometers from the sea, survives because of the geology there. Limestone deposits keep the groundwater flowing, creates the conditions mangroves need.
So it's like a little piece of the coast tucked away inland. Nature finds a way, right? But what makes it a biodiversity heritage site? What should a UPSC aspirant be taking note of?
Well, first, its rarity. Last remaining inland mangrove in India, one of only 8 such sites globally. We're talking about something truly special.
Wow, so it's not just about the ecosystem itself, it's about preserving a piece of natural history.
Exactly. And this highlights the Biodiversity Act of 2002, empowers state governments to declare sites like this, take steps to conserve them.
So understanding that legal framework for biodiversity, the role of state governments in protection, that's key.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch gears to global health for a minute. WHO just congratulated Niger for eliminating onchocerciasis. River blindness, they call it.
That's incredible. Heard about this disease, that name, river blindness? Always sounded a bit mysterious, to be honest. What is it exactly, and why is eliminating it such a big deal?
It's a parasitic disease spread by those black flies that breed around rivers, hence the name river blindness.
Okay, that makes sense. But why blindness? What's so dangerous about it?
The parasite can actually migrate to the eyes, causes severe inflammation, leads to vision loss, sometimes total blindness.
That's awful. And this mostly affects communities in sub-Saharan Africa, right? The impact must be devastating, not just for individuals, but whole communities.
Imagine losing your sight, you lose your livelihood, become dependent on others, and there's the social stigma too. It's a huge barrier to development.
So for Niger to eliminate this, it's not just a public health victory, it's a win for social and economic well-being too.
Absolutely. Years of work, mass drug administration campaigns, vector control, community engagement shows what's possible with sustained effort.
So multiple layers to tackling a complex health challenge. And for those prepping for UPSC, got to understand the role of organizations like the WHO in supporting these efforts, right?
Definitely. Global health challenges need global solutions. This is a great example. All right, back to the Indian economy for a moment. This Pradhan Mantri Dhanya Krishi Yojana, new scheme targeting agricultural challenges in 100 districts, caught my eye. This one's interesting because it's so focused. It's not a blanket approach. It's tailored to the specific constraints these districts are facing. Builds on that idea of the aspirational districts program.
Ah, so like we were saying earlier, targeted interventions, recognizing that different regions have different needs, got to tailor solutions accordingly.
Exactly. And the focus is on making agriculture in these areas more productive, more resilient, improving irrigation, access to credit, promoting diverse crops, even better storage facilities.
So it's a multi-pronged approach, tackling those challenges head on.
Exactly. And it's important to see that connection to the Aspirational Districts program. It's recognizing that agricultural development, that's key to uplifting these districts as a whole. It's about more than just growing crops.
It's about livelihoods, rural opportunities. If you improve the agricultural sector, you reduce that need for people to migrate, looking for work elsewhere.
Exactly. And for those prepping for UPSC, it's about seeing those connections, understanding the potential impact of these schemes, not just on the economy, but on social well-being too.
All right, how about we end this segment with a trip to a place that's both fascinating and a bit, well, concerning. This giant iceberg, A23A, it's on the move, headed towards South Georgia Island.
This one's captivating. It's the world's largest iceberg, broken off from Antarctica, now drifting towards this remote island. Talk about the power of nature. Right?
South Georgia Island, what's the context there? Why should we be concerned about this iceberg heading its way?
It's a subantarctic island, incredibly remote, incredibly important for wildlife. Think penguins, seals, millions of seabirds, all dependent on this fragile ecosystem.
So a pristine environment, teeming with life, suddenly facing this, well, gigantic visitor.
It's a delicate balance. And an iceberg that size, it can disrupt everything. The foraging routes of animals, the breeding grounds, even the ocean currents could be affected.
And it brings us back to climate change, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is a consequence of rising temperatures, melting glaciers, these massive icebergs breaking off.
It's a stark reminder that these changes have a ripple effect. What happens in Antarctica impacts an island thousands of miles away. It's all connected.
That's a sobering thought, for sure. All right, we've covered a lot of ground in this first segment.
It is, and it highlights how these initiatives, even if they seem focused on one area, can have these ripple effects.
Right, like we were talking about earlier, those targeted interventions, the idea that there isn't one solution that fits every situation. Got to tailor it to the specific needs.
You're absolutely right. And this new scheme, the Pradhan Mantri Dhanya Krishi Yojana, that's a perfect example, targeting those 100 districts with specific agricultural challenges.
So taking a page from the Aspirational Districts program, but focusing on the agricultural sector.
Exactly. They're not just saying, here's some money, go farm. They're identifying the unique constraints these districts face and then tailoring the solutions. So improving irrigation, expanding access to credit, promoting different crops that might be better suited to those areas, even improving storage facilities that reduces waste, increases incomes. It's a whole package.
And by tying it to the Aspirational Districts program, It's acknowledging that agriculture isn't just about boosting crop yields. It's about lifting those communities as a whole.
Right. It's about recognizing that interconnectedness. Improving agriculture can have these ripple effects: better incomes, better health, better education, even reduced migration out of those areas.
It's a multi-pronged approach to addressing some deep-rooted issues.
And that's a key takeaway for anyone prepping for the UPSC, isn't it? Understanding these connections, these layers of impact. It's not just about memorizing schemes, it's about understanding the bigger picture.
All right, how about we shift gears a bit? From targeted interventions in agriculture to, well, a slightly less targeted intervention by Mother Nature. We've talked about this giant iceberg, A23A, heading towards South Georgia Island. Still can't wrap my head around the sheer scale of it.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it? 4 times the size of London, they're saying. Just this massive chunk of ice broken off from Antarctica, now on this slow, steady journey towards this remote island.
In South Georgia Island, it's not exactly a bustling metropolis, is it? It's a pretty fragile environment.
Exactly. Known for its incredible wildlife, millions of penguins, seals, seabirds, all dependent on that ecosystem. And then this iceberg shows up.
Talk about an unwelcome guest.
Yeah.
But what's the real concern here? What kind of damage could this iceberg actually do?
Well, think about it. It's like a giant icy bulldozer drifting slowly towards this delicate environment. The biggest concern is if it grounds on the shallow seabed around the island. That could scrape the seabed, destroying habitats, releasing who knows what into the water.
So not just the immediate impact of this giant thing bumping into the island, but those wider consequences for the ecosystem as a whole.
Exactly. And South Georgia Island, it's a haven for wildlife. Penguins, seals, albatrosses, all these creatures depend on that marine ecosystem for food, for breeding. If that gets disrupted, it could be devastating.
And it's a reminder, isn't it? Climate change, this isn't just about temperatures rising a few degrees. It's about these dramatic events, these disruptions that have a global impact.
Absolutely. Ice melting in Antarctica leads to an iceberg threatening an island thousands of miles away. It's all connected.
Speaking of connections, this statement about NaBFID setting up a partial credit enhancement facility for infrastructure bonds, that got my attention. But I have to admit, it sounds like something straight out of an economics textbook.
It might sound a bit complex at first, but the idea behind it is actually quite simple. It's about making infrastructure bonds more attractive to investors.
Because infrastructure, that's a long game, right? You invest in a project that takes years, sometimes decades, to see returns.
Yeah.
A lot can happen in that time.
Exactly. So for an investor, it can be a risky proposition. That's where NaBFID comes in. They essentially guarantee a portion of those bonds. So if the project faces difficulties, investors are protected.
So it's about reducing that risk, making those investments more palatable, especially for those who might be wary of putting their money in something as long-term as infrastructure.
Exactly. And by doing that, NaBFID is encouraging more investment into these crucial projects, the kind that will ultimately boost economic growth, create jobs, improve lives.
So it's a way to use financial tools to address developmental challenges. It's not always just about pouring money into a problem. Sometimes it's about creating the right environment for that investment to happen.
That's a very astute observation.
All right, let's shift gears one last time. From finance to, well, something a bit more spatial, this National Geospatial Mission. They're making a lot of noise about the potential of geospatial data. But I think a lot of people might be wondering, what exactly does that even mean?
It's a good question. You know, we're used to maps, but this is taking it to a whole new level. It's about creating a digital representation of India. But it's not just about showing where things are.
It's like adding layers of information, right? Going beyond the physical features, adding data about land ownership, resources, infrastructure, demographics, everything.
Precisely. And once you have all that data in a digital format, you can analyze it. You can use it to make better decisions. Think about something like urban planning. With accurate geospatial data, you can design cities that are more efficient, more sustainable, more resilient.
So it's not just about drawing lines on a map. It's about using data to make those cities work better for the people who live in them.
And that's just one example. Think about disaster management. Imagine having real-time data during a flood or an earthquake. That can help coordinate rescue efforts, get aid to where it's needed faster, save lives.
So it's about using technology to respond to crises more effectively.
Exactly. And then there's land management. That's a huge one in India. land disputes, unclear boundaries that can all be addressed with accurate geospatial data.
And that can have huge knock-on effects, right? Less conflict, more efficient land use, better agricultural practices. It all ties together.
And don't forget, this mission, it's built on existing initiatives. It ties into the PM Gati Shakti framework, that whole push for integrated infrastructure development. By bringing geospatial data into that, it's about making those projects even more efficient, ensuring they're properly planned, that they're aligned with the needs of the region.
So it's about connecting the dots, using technology to create a more holistic approach to development.
That's exactly it. And for those preparing for the UPSC, this is a key concept to grasp, isn't it? Understanding the role of technology, how it can be leveraged to address these complex challenges, that's essential.
Absolutely. All right, how about we end this segment with a little detour to a hidden gem in Gujarat. This inland mangrove in Guneri village, they just declared it a biodiversity heritage site. I've got to admit, inland mangrove, that's not something you hear every day.
It's pretty unique. We think of mangroves, we think of coastlines, those brackish water environments, but this one's about 45 kilometers inland.
So how does that even work? How do mangroves survive so far from the sea?
It's because of the geology of the area. Those limestone deposits, they create a constant flow of groundwater, and that groundwater happens to be saline.
So it's like nature's created this little pocket of salt water inland, just the right conditions for those mangroves to thrive.
Exactly. And it's not just about the mangroves themselves. That whole ecosystem is unique, supports a variety of other species, adds to the biodiversity of the region. But the thing that makes this particular site so special, it's one of the last remaining inland mangroves in India, one of only 8 globally.
We're talking about something incredibly rare, something that needs to be protected.
Absolutely, and that's why declaring it a biodiversity heritage site is such an important step. It raises awareness, it provides legal protection, it's a commitment to preserving something truly special.
All right, let's shift gears one last time. From conservation efforts in Gujarat to a global health victory. WHO just congratulated Niger for eliminating onchocerciasis, river blindness, as it's commonly known.
It's an incredible achievement. This disease, it's debilitating. It robs people of their sight, their livelihoods, their dignity. To eliminate it, that's a massive victory.
And this mostly affects communities in sub-Saharan Africa, right, near those fast-flowing rivers where the black flies that transmit the disease breed.
Exactly. Hence the name, river blindness. And it's not just about the physical impact of blindness, it's the social and economic consequences. People lose their ability to work, to provide for their families.
So for Niger to achieve this, it's not just a public health victory, it's a victory for those communities, for their development, for their future.
You're absolutely right. It is a massive victory, years of effort, mass drug administration. That was key. Getting those medicines out to communities, treating the infection.
Right, but I'm guessing it wasn't just about handing out pills. There's got to be more to it.
You're right. They also focused on controlling those black flies that spread the disease. Spraying insecticides, encouraging people to use bed nets.
So attacking the problem from multiple angles.
Exactly. And a crucial part of it, community engagement. You can't just impose these solutions from the outside. You've got to work with communities, build trust, make sure those interventions are culturally sensitive, address any concerns people might have.
It's about empowering those communities to take ownership of their health, right?
Exactly. And it's a great example of international cooperation, too. The WHO, the World Bank, NGOs, they all played a role, providing support, sharing expertise, shows what's possible when we work together.
Global challenges need global solutions, that's for sure. All right, let's bring it back home to India. We were talking about this new scheme, Pradhan, Mantri, Dhanya, Krishi, Yojana, targeting agricultural challenges in 100 districts. It's interesting how this focus on targeted interventions keeps coming up.
It's becoming a trend across different sectors, isn't it?
Yeah.
Moving away from those one-size-fits-all solutions, recognizing that every region, every community has its own unique set of challenges.
So it's about being more nuanced in our approach to development, understanding those specific needs.
Exactly. And for those prepping for the UPSC, this is a key skill, analyzing a situation, identifying the real challenges, coming up with solutions that are targeted, effective, sustainable.
All right, let's end today's deep dive with a story that's, well, it's both captivating and a bit concerning. We talked about this giant iceberg, A23A, drifting towards South Georgia Island. It's hard to fathom the scale of something like that.
It is, isn't it? A massive chunk of ice, broken off from Antarctica, slowly making its way across the ocean. It's a powerful reminder of the forces at play on our planet.
And South Georgia Island, it's not exactly a bustling metropolis. It's a pretty fragile environment.
Exactly. Known for its incredible wildlife, penguins, seals, all these creatures that depend on that ecosystem. And then this iceberg shows up.
Talk about an unwelcome guest.
And the concern is that it could cause some serious damage. If it grounds on the shallow seabed around the island, it could disrupt everything. Those delicate habitats on the seabed could be destroyed, food chains disrupted.
It's like a giant icy bulldozer approaching this delicate ecosystem.
That's a good way to put it. And it brings us back to climate change, doesn't it? This is a consequence of those rising temperatures, those melting glaciers. What happens in Antarctica, it has an impact on the rest of the world.
It's all connected. It's a sobering thought, for sure.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground today. From manufacturing to education, from finance to the environment, even a journey to a remote island threatened by a giant iceberg. It's been a diverse deep dive, but that's the nature of current affairs, isn't it? It's about understanding these connections, how seemingly disparate events and policies are all intertwined.
So for our dedicated UPSC aspirants out there, remember, staying informed is key. But it's not just about absorbing information. It's about analyzing it, connecting the dots, developing that holistic perspective. That's what'll give you that edge in the exam and in your future career.
Absolutely.
All right, that's all for today's deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep that UPSC dream burning bright.